It was a humid night on a classified training ground in the southern Philippines. The kind of heat that clings to your skin. The kind that turns uniforms dark before anyone even moves. No press, no cameras, no audience. Nothing that would ever make it into a report. Just jungle air, floodlights humming in the distance, and two flags planted firmly in the dirt. The American flag and the Philippine sun. 14 men stood facing each other. 7 operators from the most feared special operations unit on Earth, men whose names would never be spoken publicly, whose missions were buried under layers of classification. Across from them, 7 Filipino soldiers most of the world had never heard of. No mythology, no headlines, no reputation beyond their own circles. They didn't look imposing, they didn't look polished, but they were watching, quietly, closely. One of the Americans stepped forward. Texas accent, relaxed shoulders, that casual confidence that comes from knowing your unit's reputation usually ends conversations before they begin. Too relaxed. He reached into his cargo pocket and pulled out a thick stack of $100 bills, creased, heavy, unmistakable. He didn't count it. He didn't hesitate. He slapped it onto an ammo crate so hard the metal rang. 10 grand says we smoke you in every event, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. 7-0, easy. A few of the Americans laughed. Not cruelly, not angrily. The kind of laughter that assumes the ending is already written. The Filipino team didn't laugh. Their commander, a quiet major with scars older than some of his men, looked at the money. He didn't rush, didn't blink. Then he looked back at the American. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he smiled. Just once. Deal, he said calmly, his English precise and unaccented. But when we win, you go home quiet. The Americans shifted slightly. No excuses. The major continued. No stories. No explanations. He paused. Just silence. The American laughed again. Louder this time. The sound carried across the training ground, echoing briefly before being swallowed by the jungle. That laugh would not last the week. 7 events, 1 week, no do-overs. Winner takes the cash. And the truth about who really belongs in the jungle. The year was 2018. Joint training exchanges between U.S. and Philippine Special Forces had been running quietly for years. Routine, predictable, professional. They were meant to sharpen skills, share tactics, and reinforce partnerships. Nothing more. No rivalries, no egos, no scorekeeping. But this rotation was different. This time, 1st SFODD, Delta Force, sent a training cadre to the Philippines. Not observers, not advisors passing through, but operators tasked with refining the counter-terror edge of Philippine units that had been fighting non-stop for years. Specifically, men from the Light Reaction Regiment and the Scout, Ranger Regiment, units forged in urban sieges, jungle pursuits, and real manhunts, often with limited support and almost no margin for error. Delta arrived like legends. Not loudly, not arrogantly, just unmistakably. Custom rifles built to personal specification, Night Force optics dialed to perfection, Cry precision gear that cost more than a used car back home. Everything clean, everything matched, everything intentional. These were men who had kicked doors on real targets, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in places that would never appear in books or documentaries. They carried themselves like people who were used to being the final authority in any room. And usually they were. Then there were the Filipinos. Faded woodland camouflage, sun-bleached from years of patrols. Boots that didn't match, some new, some rebuilt, some barely hanging on. Rifles scarred, scratched, and held together with tape, cord, and improvisation. No custom optics, no uniform kit, no aesthetic. Polish. But they didn't fidget, didn't stare, didn't perform. They simply watched. On paper, this wasn't a competition. One side had money, technology, global prestige. The other had terrain, repetition, and memory. Every logical assumption pointed in one direction. And when one side looks unbeatable, that's usually when bets get made. That's why the money came out. That's why the challenge was spoken out loud. And that's why what followed shocked everyone who thought they already knew how the story would end. 1,000 meters. Day and night. Known distance. Unknown distance. No excuses. This was the kind of range work that separated professionals from legends. Delta arrived prepared. Ballistic computers clipped to plate carriers. Laser rangefinders humming quietly. Weather meters reading wind, density, temperature. Two of their shooters were former Army marksmanship unit competitors, men who had won trophies, taught others how to shoot, and done this exact drill more times than they could remember. They moved with calm certainty. The Filipinos showed up carrying far less. One shared spotting scope for the entire team, old, scratched, and faded. Handwritten dope cards on stiff pieces of cardboard, smudged from sweat and rain. And on one rifle, tied just behind the muzzle, a short piece of yarn. That was it. No computers, no lasers, no digital anything. The Americans noticed. A few smirked. Cold bore shots counted double. First rounds always tell the truth. Delta fired first. The shooter settled in. Breath controlled, trigger press clean. Steel rang. 9 out of 10 hits. A cold bore strike right where it should be. Quiet nods passed through the American line. This was already over. Or so it seemed. Then the Filipino shooter stepped up. He was smaller than most of the men watching. Lean, unhurried. He didn't rush the rifle, didn't talk, didn't look around. He checked the wind by watching the yarn flutter slightly. To the left. Adjusted. 10 shots, 30 seconds, no drama, gong, gong, gong. The sound didn't stop. 10 hits, dead center. No celebration, no reaction, just the spotter quietly marking the score. At night, things were supposed to swing back in Delta's favor. They brought the best night vision money could buy. Modern tubes, crystal clarity. The Filipinos ran old, battered night vision, some of it generations behind. Then the moving targets came up. Delta dropped shots. Not many, but enough. The Filipinos didn't miss. Perfect scores, in the dark, on movers. When the final numbers were read aloud, no one spoke. Event 1. Philippines win. The smirks disappeared. The jokes stopped. And for the first time that week, the Americans realized this wasn't a warm-up. It was a warning. 2-story concrete shoothouse, bare walls, narrow stairwells, blind corners everywhere, live role players, simunition rounds, full protective gear, but no forgiveness. One mistake here didn't just cost time, it ended the run. This was Delta's world. They lived for this kind of work. They had built legendary shoot houses back home. They rehearsed these movements until they were muscle memory. They stacked on the door. The breach came clean. They flowed like water. Textbook entries, perfect spacing, clear calls echoing through the structure. Targets dropped, hostages secured. The timer stopped. 28 seconds, clean run. No faults. Quiet nods from the American observers. This was what dominance looked like. Then the Filipinos stepped up. No shouting, no aggressive pacing, no performance for the clock. They didn't flow. They disappeared. The door opened, and then nothing. No loud commands, no frantic movement, just muffled shots, short bursts, silence. The role players later said they never saw them coming. Moments later, the team emerged from the structure, carrying the hostage like he weighed nothing. The timer stopped. 19 seconds. The American. Judge stared at the clock. Runs 2 through 5 only widened the gap. The Filipinos stayed consistent. Fast, quiet, precise. Delta began to rush. corners were cut, stacks tightened too much. On one run, a Delta assaulter clipped a hostage with sim rounds. Instant disqualification. No argument, no protest. Final averages were read out loud. Philippines 20 seconds, Delta 31 seconds. 2 events completed. The scoreboard didn't lie. 0 wins for Delta. And for the first time, the Americans weren't just surprised. They were unsettled. Night insertion, moonless, black water stretching endlessly in every direction. 2 kilometers offshore, the kind of distance that doesn't sound long. Until you're carrying full kit, weapons sealed, breath measured, and the shoreline is nothing but a darker shade of black. Delta prepared methodically. Closed-circuit rebreathers, dry suits sealed tight, equipment designed for exactly this kind of operation. They had done insertions like this from submarines, from ships, in hostile waters. This was familiar ground. The Filipinos arrived with almost none of that. Snorkels bought at local shops, homemade dry bags stitched together from rice sacks and duct tape. No rebreathers, no dry suits, just bodies, lungs, and water. The boat slowed, engines cut. Delta slipped beneath the surface and vanished. Silent, efficient, professional, the Filipinos stayed on the surface. They didn't rush, didn't panic. They swam, steady, rhythmic. Endless strokes cutting quietly through the dark. Time stretched, minutes passed, then more. At 78 minutes, figures emerged from the water onto the beach. Filipino operators, weapons dry, gear intact. Someone lit a cigarette. They waited. 16 minutes later, Delta surfaced. One man was shivering uncontrollably. His dry suit had failed. Another coughed seawater. Their insertion had been spotted by roaming patrols long before they reached the shore. The clock stopped. There was nothing to argue. 3 events, 3 losses, 3-0. No one was talking now. No jokes, no commentary, just quiet recalculations. And the growing realization that this week was no longer going according to anyone's expectations. 10 square kilometers of triple canopy jungle, thick enough to block sunlight, dense enough to swallow sound, alive in a way that never truly sleeps. This wasn't terrain. It was a living maze. The rules were simple. Photograph the enemy camp without being detected. No contact, no compromises. Any hit, airsoft pellet, glancing strike, counted as death. Delta treated it like doctrine. They donned ghillie suits worth thousands of dollars, custom-stitched, perfectly patterned, designed to erase a human outline completely. They moved the way they had been taught, painfully slow, inches per hour. Every branch tested, every footfall measured. This was a game they believed they had invented. The Filipinos didn't wear ghillies. They wore green t-shirts, face paint smeared unevenly across skin, leaves tucked into collars, straps, hair. No pattern, no symmetry. Then they vanished. Not slowly, not dramatically. They were simply gone. Hours passed, then a full day. Delta's camp remained quiet, secure, unaware. 29 hours after insertion, something happened. A Filipino spotter, mud-soaked, silent, invisible, completed an 800-meter belly crawl through roots, insects, and wet earth. He didn't rush, didn't pause. He reached the perimeter. He raised a phone and took a clear, unmistakable photograph of Delta's flag, centered in focus, undeniable. Then, as a message, not a celebration, he pinned a single playing card to a nearby tree, an ace of spades, fixed in place with a knife, inside Delta's perimeter. He crawled out the same way he came in. Delta never saw him. When Delta attempted their counter-stalk, using the same patience, the same methods, they were killed from over 300 meters away before they ever saw movement. The adjudicators didn't hesitate. Event 4. Philippines win. 4-0. This wasn't just a loss. This was violation. This was the moment the Americans stopped thinking in terms of events and started wondering if they had fundamentally misunderstood who they were facing. This is where the confidence cracked. This is where the week began to unravel. Full mission profile, the kind planners dream about. Black Hawk insertion, fast rope onto the objective, breaching charges set, rooms cleared in sequence. This was Delta's language. They rehearsed for 2 full days. Walkthroughs, rehearsals at night, rehearsals tired and angry. Every movement timed, every contingency mapped. When Delta hit an objective in the real world, things ended quickly. That reputation had been earned. The Filipinos rehearsed once, then they vanished. No repeated walkthroughs, no endless adjustments. They packed light, said little, and went quiet. On the night of the raid, the Black Hawk thundered in low and fast. Rotors chopped the darkness. Fast ropes dropped. Delta operators slid down like machines, disciplined, aggressive, flawless. Breaching charges blew exactly on cue. Flashbangs rolled perfectly. Sectors covered. Rooms cleared. It was textbook. But when they reached the final room, the reason the entire raid existed, the objective wasn't there. No laptop, no intel package, no target. Just empty space. Confusion rippled through the stack, because 3 hours earlier, the Filipinos had already walked through the front gate. No helicopters, no noise, dressed as local farmers, heads down. Unremarkable. They zip-tied the role players, collected the intel, took photos, then they left. Quietly. By the time Delta was fast roping onto the roof, the Filipinos were already kilometers away. Sitting under a tree, passing around beers, watching the sky light up in the distance. The adjudicators didn't need long. Event 5, Philippines win. 5-0. And this time, no one argued. Because Delta hadn't failed. They had executed perfectly. They were just too late. And that realization hurt more than any mistake ever could. Real bullets, real hostages. No simulations now, no margin for error. This was the event everyone respected. The one that could not be talked away, replayed, or reinterpreted. One mistake here meant blood. Delta understood that better than anyone. They selected their best shooters, suppressed rifles, fresh zeros, men who could put rounds through the same hole without thinking. The door came down. They flowed clean, deliberate, controlled. Every shot placed, every target confirmed. The timer stopped. 42 seconds, 0 hostages hit. For the first time all week, the Americans felt it. Relief. This was what a win looked like. This was the moment the tide could turn. Finally, a chance. Then the Filipinos stepped forward. Same battered rifles, same mismatched gear. One operator's stock was cracked, held together with cord and tape. They didn't pause, didn't posture. The breach came, and something changed. They moved so fast the range officers struggled to follow. So quiet that shots seemed to appear before sound. Targets fell in sequence. Hostages were cleared almost before anyone realized they were there. The timer stopped. 26 seconds. Perfect. No hostages hit. No hesitation. No wasted movement. As they exited the shoot house, the Filipino team leader stopped. He turned toward the Delta observers. Calm, respectful. "Sir," he said, "your hostages are safe." He gestured back toward the structure. "Coffee is on the table." 6-0. By now, no one was angry. Some Delta operators stood quietly off to the side, not speaking, not reacting, just watching, just taking notes. Because whatever this was, it wasn't luck anymore. No one expected the final event. Knife only. Jungle. No referees. Delta sent their biggest man, 240 pounds of muscle. The Filipinos sent a smaller operator. smiling. 47 minutes later, the Filipino walked out untouched. Delta's man stumbled out covered in chalk cuts. No words. 7-0. The $10,000 changed hands. No ceremony, no speeches. Delta packed up that day. As the C-17 taxied out, one young American operator looked back at the Filipinos and whispered, "I will never talk trash again." The money was donated to an orphanage in Mindanao, and the story stayed buried. Until now. Because the lesson isn't that Delta Force failed. It's this: never underestimate warriors who learned to survive because they had no other choice. They didn't win with better gear. They won with necessity. And sometimes, that's unbeatable.